Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session. Thank you for coming. Today we're going to talk about something pretty exciting, a technique known as visible architectures that can help you create better solutions for your customers. And it starts with Duplo. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Luke Hohmann. I'm a SAFE Fellow, a former member of the Framework team, and the Chief Innovation Officer at Applied Frameworks. What's that? That looks like a lot of Duplo and string, huh? Well, this is a physical model of the Continuo Weave platform. Now, this is the platform that Scaled Agile acquired in 2019 and forms the foundation of SAFE Studio. At the top of this picture, you can see some little Duplo figures that represent users. There's a couple of other important pieces, a black piece and a white piece, that represent things like Nginx and load balancers, and eventually you get down to the pink plate, which represents our database, and some other plates which represent external systems. So what does this mean? Well, let me define it. A visible architecture is a physical model of a system. We typically have the architecture teams create this in Duplo blocks so they can write on these blocks and use string and yarn and other elements to bring these blocks to life. And we typically create both an as-is architecture so that we can make better choices on the to-be architecture. And the creative freedom afforded by the technique enables teams to explore challenging concepts. More importantly, it creates alignment with all of the business leaders and business owners. Let's talk about that. Why should we do this in the first place? Well, we see a set of consistent problems. Business leaders really don't understand our technical architectures, which means they don't invest in enablers. And technical leaders often don't know how to speak business. So we fail to leverage the creativity of technical leaders from the business side because we're not sure of what they're saying and we're not sure how it relates to our business. There are lots of conflicting ways to communicate. So technical leaders tend to want to go use technical language or technical techniques like TOEFL or ITIL or CMAT. And so we end up wasting time on some pretty needless details. We also miss choices that align the business and technology, which inhibits customer centricity. In a technical organization or a technical solution, the actual architecture is vital to making sure that we are serving our customer needs. For example, if I'm in a SaaS system, I have to have an architecture that can respond to the user input in a timely manner. And our dev teams, they're lost. Our dev teams are often not as highly trained or as deeply embedded into the architectures themselves. And so they're not always sure, well, what's a microservice or a library and what APIs are we using and how does this how do these components interact? Well, that confusion is manifested with various impediments to the flow of value. Now, during the process of creating a visible architecture, we're going to find the need to create desired improvements. And we use a different format than the typical epic description of the Jeffrey Moore positioning statement. When we're working on visible architectures, we want to be really clear about the change we're making. And so we have found the following template to be very helpful. We want to change the thing we want to change from the current state to the desired state because of a business reason or in order to gain a benefit. And we know we're done when there's a certain criteria for success. And this format helps technical leaders communicate improvements to their business counterparts. Now, there's more than one improvement that's going to be made in this process. So during the visible architecture event, we help teams by mapping them into impact effort matrices. Now, these are two of the inputs that you'll want to put into your WSJIP formula. Of course, there's time criticality and there's cost elements, but just looking at the business value and the effort gives you a great opportunity to identify which of the improvements being discussed or which of the enablers being discussed are going to be the most impactful. So let's talk about how you would plan a visible architecture event. First, you want to frame the discussion in the larger business context. Is it part of an agile transformation? Is it in the beginning? Is it in the middle? Is it at the end? Have you been doing SAFe a while, or are you new to SAFe? Are you seeking to simply improve velocity, or are you part of something else? Like maybe you're acquiring a company or you're integrating company. One of the projects we did for a company, PayU, and their visible architecture was they had 6 companies that they had acquired in the payment processing space. And we were using the technique of visible architecture to identify how to bring all of these organizations together into one architecture, which was a multi-year effort, but it was guided by a set of visible architectures. Are you moving from a monolith to microservices and you want to have some very clear understanding of how you're going to have the different microservices interoperate? Are you trying to increase collaboration among distributed teams? Now, it seems odd that you'll use an in-person or physical technique to increase collaboration, but when you bring architects together from around the world, they work on these architectures, they can bring them back to their local teams. And we've done that at companies like BMW. One time we created a visible architecture in Chicago, and then we flew some architects to Munich where we recreated the visible architecture, and then we extended it in the Munich office. So there's ways in which you can use this physical structure to create global alignment. We will also talk about, at the end of the presentation, some ideas about how we can use digital tools to enhance our visible architecture. Finally, are you just looking for a technology refresh? We know that as technology evolves, we want to take opportunities. Maybe you were, in one case, in a situation I was associated with, we were hosting the Continuo Weave platform on Rackspace, and it just emerged over time that Amazon created a better foundation, and we used visible architecture to help map out how we were going to go from Rackspace into Amazon. Finally, is there some new business capability that's needed? We are technology companies. The business capabilities that we offer are powered from a technology foundation, and therefore we want to know what these technology foundations are so that we can build on them. Now let's talk about how you're going to prepare for the event. This template is very simple, but it's very powerful. Who? You want to know who will be creating what? A visible architecture in order to why. So here were 2 examples. Architects from each PayU platform will be creating a visible architecture to identify redundancies, outdated code, and prepare for PayU's move to microservices. The second would be architects will create a visible architecture to see which changes will help us remove the most technical debt. It's not a complex template, but it's a very important template. Now let's talk a little bit about how you're going to prepare for the event itself. And the event is usually a few days long, so we'll also give some examples of how the event works in logistics. You don't want to just run into event. You need to help gather the data. And so there are probably some existing technical documentation that you can leverage. In the center of the screen, you can see Philippe Cruchen's 4+1 views of architecture. It's a good place to start. You might include a data model. You might include a message sequence diagram. You might include a block architecture from your marketing on your website. You might even include some other elements from your Confluence or your other documentation pages. But you want to bring these into the room, poster print them. And when I say poster print, I mean in American terms, 2 feet by 3 feet or 3 feet by 4 feet. In European terms, this would be something like an A0. So you want to print these out, tape them to the wall, so it's not like PowerPoint where it's kind of hidden. It's always visible in the room as the architects are working. Then you want to engage your dev teams before the event. You want to use Safe Studio to surface trends, patterns, and other information. So I'm going to give you 3 frameworks that you can use that are incredibly powerful to help you prepare for a visible architecture event. The first is Sailboat, and you can conduct an enterprise retrospective. And what we mean by an enterprise retrospective is that every single team will play Sailboat, and then you'll download all the data and analyze them across teams. And Sailboat, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a very simple retrospective technique. You're simply going to look at what are the wins in our sales, the things that are helping us go faster, and what are the anchors that are slowing us down. And you'll analyze the results in terms of people, process, and technology, so you can start to look at the technology angle in preparation for the visible architecture event. The next framework that you can consider is a framework I developed to help understand how we can do a jump and a curve. As you can see, every technology that we use kind of follows an S-shaped curve of adoption and eventually becomes obsolete. So we don't really use Fortran very much anymore. We don't really use Algol or other programming languages or other programming techniques. And as you're going through that curve, you can jump a curve. Now there's 3 ways to jump a curve. You could go to more an evolutionary technology, which is very safe. You can go to the next version of your own or a related technology, a little riskier, but perhaps also a little bit bigger benefit. Or you can completely switch and do an evolutionary jump. And that curve jump, and again, your developers are playing this forum, this curve jump activity gives you an opportunity to tap into your global organization's creativity. Finally, the last activity that we would advocate, and this one you want to bring in your business leaders and your product managers and product owners into, is prune the product tree, which is going to focus on the organic growth of your solution. How should our system grow and evolve and change over time? What elements can we prune or remove? And what infrastructure can we add in the roots to support our tree? Once you've got these data, you're going to be more prepared for the event. So let's talk a little bit about logistics. You're going to need gear, and you're going to need a lot of gear. You want to have a sense of abundance. So we typically buy our supplies on eBay. I'll buy used Duplo, I'll buy used materials if I need to, and then I'll get the rest from Amazon. We'll get dozens of people, we'll get old gears, and you can like buy boxes of Duplo pretty simply. But we're also going to have paper on the walls, and we're going to have foam core boards. I've learned over time that you need to actually build the visible architecture on foam core boards so that you can move them around. We've also looked at glue and Sharpies and all the other kinds of things that you need, but you do need a lot of gear. And on our website at Applied Frameworks, we'll be providing some resources that you can download that you can just go ahead and click on and see materials and shopping lists. You also need a big room. So this is an example from an event that we did at Cisco. We had about 4 10-person roundtables, which gave the architects a place to sit and plenty of room to collaborate. But then we had 6 4-foot by 8-foot tables where the teams were creating their as-is and to-be Duplo models. So you really do need a lot of space, physical space. You also need plenty of time. Usually a visible architecture event is going to take 3 days to 5 days. So in this case, you can see that Monday was a travel day and just a preparation. And don't discount how much time you're going to take to prepare the room. It usually takes me about a half a day of work with a couple other people to make sure the room is fully prepared for the event. On Tuesday, we do an overview of visible architectures, and the technical team develops their first draft of an as-is architecture. And then we start to get them to develop some ideas for improving it. But it usually does take a full day to develop that full architecture. Now, This can be one of those pizza nights where the team chooses to stay because they're on a roll and they just want to keep going. And if that's the case, just let them. On Wednesday, we compare results with known business objectives and context to make sure that where we're headed is the right way, and we start to share results with business leaders. So the parts of the schedule that are in green are specifically designed to collaborate with the business leaders, the product owners, the business owners, and other people who have business roles or leadership roles. Then we start to build the to-be states, and we compare the results with known business objectives and context. We continue to have a session where we work with the business leaders. Note that on Wednesday, we advocate having a shared dinner. It can be a really wonderful opportunity to build relationships, especially when the team is distributed. Finally, on Friday, we start to finish things up. The production team photographs everything. We transcribe what we need to transcribe. If you've been off-site at a hotel, we start to transport the results back to the office. We start to, at times, glue the as-is architecture down. We start to get it ready for transport. So this was an example for some work we did with Cisco and some of their security teams. You need to iterate. Throughout the event, you're going to be going from the visible architecture to the change statements, to the impact effort matrix, and you're going to kind of going back and forth. So you're going to see a lot of things hanging on the walls and adjusting in real time. Now, what are some of the results that we're going to create? Well, you're going to end up developing enabler epics for the ideas, and so those ideas surfaced in the session need to be converted into epics, and then you're going to leverage the safe epic cycle to your advantage. So you're going to create an MVP, but there's a lot of things that you're going to be looking at. Investigative stories, spike sprints, training tasks, business reviews, getting interactions with vendors on how a new technology might work, or even partnering with the vendors to explore how a given change might affect your system. We know Conway's law says that organizations design systems that mirror their own communication structures. What this also means is that once the system is built, it's resistant to change. So if we're going to go from the top left, we've got to make a change to our organization. So we usually add in some team refactoring and some team restructuring in the same room at the same time that we're talking about the changes to the architecture. Now, of course, we know in SAFe and in the best practices of Agile that we want our teams to be as stable as possible. However, there is also a place and a time for change in teams, and this is the right place and the right time to consider changes in teams. You want to keep your visible architecture visible. So PayU place their architecture directly in their shared meeting space and use QR codes to connect visible architecture to their back-end systems through the intranet. BMW videotaped architects presenting their visible architecture to educate and align the global team. And DaVita Kidney Care even tried using Minecraft. And if we have time after the questions, I can give you a little demo of how we worked with DaVita to try using Minecraft. Thank you very much. Please rate this session. I try to make sure that we have a lot of time to deal with questions. The questions you submit through the app, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.